Hello again. My name is Patty Roche. I'm one of the owners of C60 Evo with my partner, Chris Burres
Hello.
and Robert Wong.
Hello.
You rarely see Robert because he's usually at the lab, but he is a very integral part of our processing. So I wanted to talk about the different ways that C60 can be manufactured around the world. And then you'll understand, what it is that you might want for your personal choice. The process that we're doing in our lab is a special one because we're purifying it to the point where we end up with not industrial grade C60 or varieties, but just pure ESS60 carbon 60. Fabulous. So Robert, if you might explain the manufacturing process of how we do it in our lab to the audience.
Sure, I'll do it, Patty. I can't go into all the details, but it's based off the Huffman-Krasner process where you take a pair of graphite rods and you put it into the reactor under a certain condition, vaporizing the graphite rods. And so you break down the graphite into C2 chains. At some point in the reactor, those chains will coalesce and cool to form the spherical molecule, the carbon 60, carbon 70, 76, 78, 84, and so forth, and with all the other amorphous carbon. So after over a period of time, that we call carbon fluorine soot, the raw material, that is captured, then processed. And the next step is we take that fluorine soot, it goes into a chemical process where the fluorines are dissolved in the chemical. And what we're left with is the pure dissolved fluorines versus the amorphous carbon going through a filtration process. So now you have 100% fluorines. It will consist of the carbon 60, carbon 70, 76, 84, and so on up the chain to higher fluorines. And so from there, it gets a little more trickier, where we go to the characterization and separation of the individual families of fluorines, carbon 60 versus carbon 70, and so forth down the road. And we do that through a HPLC chromatography process. And this is all still done in chemical. And we do the separation of that. And we isolate the pure fraction of carbon 60 and the pure fraction of carbon 70. That is separated out. Then from there is where we do our distillation, where the solvents is removed, which will leave the powder, or I can say powder residue of carbon 60. From that point, it goes to many other processes to fully remove the solvents, and where we go to, we call it vacuum oven baking process. Sounds simple, but it's not as simple as everybody think it is. You don't go home and pop it in your oven and bake it. That's not going to work. But that's one of the processes we use. And after that, a few more steps after that to get it to our highest purity, which is the ESS60, which is safer for human consumption versus the industrial grade carbon 60, which we have clients buying it. And that will have residual solvents in it because those particular clients will take it, redissolve it in different chemicals, hexane, toluene, whatever they're using for it, carcinogenic stuff, so it's hazardous stuff, basically finding gasoline. And that's where they do their magic, where they do derivatizing, add other adducts to it to make their, say, solar cells, PCMBs, whatever their research project is. And so that's what they do. But we do our processing to clean up the carbon 60s to make ESS60, which is our pure C60 that's safe for human consumption.
Now, Chris, you said that some C60 is naturally occurring.
Yeah. So it's important to note, yes, it's naturally occurring. In fact, if you collect the soot from a candle flame, you usually do this by just holding a cold plate over that candle flame. You'll collect that black soot. That soot is comprised of parts per million, parts per billion of fullerenes, right? The whole gamut of fullerene, C60, C70, C76 on up. So it is a naturally occurring molecule. And then some people are like, oh, you made it in a reactor, and so therefore it is inherently different. The fact is that it doesn't matter whether it's out in space, because there's actually been a lot of carbon 60 identified in space, or whether it's collected from a candle, or whether it's collected from a reactor. A buckyball can only be a buckyball. It's got the exact 60 carbon atoms. It's got the exact number of carbon double bonds, the exact number of carbon single bonds. There literally is no difference. It's very much different than you think about synthetic hormones, and we know that there are slight differences in synthetic hormones from actual hormones, and those differences can have different impacts in the body. That is not true with a buckyball. That is not true with ESS60. It's the same molecule that you would collect from the soot in a candle.
Yeah, interesting fact. Every once in a while, we ship our product worldwide and stuff, and the customs department or the technical department asks, "Can I get the formula for C60?" Sure, C60. That's it. That's the formula. There's no formula. That is the molecule. And then people think it's a formulation of something else, C60 plus something else. No, the formula is C60.
Now, the difference between pure ESS60 and the industrial grade that your customers buy around the world for tires and solar cells and other industrial processes, how can you explain the HPLC machine that we use to be sure with every batch that it is pure?
Sure. So HPLC stands for High Performance Liquid Chromatography. So basically, if you go back to maybe elementary school and you had a sunlight in a little prism, and the light comes through and you see different color bands, it's somewhat similar to that, where the chemical what you're injecting into the system gets separated through a column, and the different UV light, but a wavelength hits the sample, and there's a way that the sample is absorbed the light beam, gives you a peak analysis of the material going through. And so by having a known standard, you can compare your sample going through in its purity, the absorption of the light that the carbon 60 will have, the absorption of the carbon 70 and the 76 and other molecules. And so the pure carbon 60 is a single peak that pops up, nothing else popping up. Now, if you have some other peaks popping up, that means you have C70 in it and C76, which you can call as a contaminant. If you're selling pure carbon 60, any other peaks that's popping up, you can consider it a contaminant.
No, it's great. And I know that you test every batch of C60 Evo that goes out so that we don't have any C70s or other carbon products in our oil. It's just pure C60. So some companies promote that they do different processes than us. And can you explain why you don't choose to do this process, or if you think it's better or not as good? I'm just curious about the sublimation. Some people claim that that's how they make their products.
Sublimation will give you probably the purest form of carbon 60. It's just a different way to separate the C70, C76, and C84 from C60. So it's a way to separate the fractions. It's giving you the same C60. And so it's just a purification process that you could use. We have done that in the past, and it's time-consuming, costly, and you will lose half your carbon 60. So basically, if you put, say you start with 10 grams of carbon 60 in the apparatus, and you vaporize it, and it goes down the tube to coalesce and reform again, half of that material can be lost due to the flow and the vacuum that you put it under. And so if you take that in consideration, that material you say costs you $10,000. It's a really high estimate. Now you only get half of it back. So now that $10,000 is worth $20,000 of material you have. And so you lost half the material. It's cost prohibitive. So anybody who is saying that they're using Sublime C60 in a process and selling it the oil, that oil should cost a lot more. a lot more, or they had no profit margin, which suggests that whoever they're buying the Sublime C60 is not really Sublime. And so, there's no way to verify if somebody in Russia or China is really doing it. Somebody just stick a tag on it, say, hey, it's Sublime. Oh, I'm buying Sublime for the same price as the ES60. Well, not really, because 1 gram of our Sublime material sells for like $1,000. Who buys it? Not the average person. Material science people buy it because they want the purest material for their research. So that's what Sublime is. I can go into more details how it actually works, but that's a lot of details.
So if they're promoting it as sublimated and it's the same price as ours or whatever, you don't believe that it's really sublimated, or they're just being really kind and not making any money?
Yeah, maybe they're kind, not going to make any money. But I really doubt that they really understand what they're buying, and they're just being, the wolves pulled over their face, if the right terminology, but they just want to, put a blind eye to it and say, hey, I bought Sublime. Really? So, we've been in business for 30 years. All the researchers around the world, all the universities around the world trust our product. And, so, the whole thing is,
That's a good one.
trust. Who are you going to buy from? You trust somebody to buy from. Now, it's like buying your gas for your car. You can buy from some little guy with a jug of gasoline on the side of the road, or you can buy from Exxon or Shell.
And I can speak to, there's really one group kind of promoting, maybe there's another one that I'm not aware of that's promoting that they're using a sublimated process. If that's in Robert's talking, hey, maybe they don't know how to test that material and don't know how to confirm that it's sublimated. I would argue that that's definitely true. In fact, if you look on some of the packaging on the market, they've actually done egregious scientific work and mixed English units with British units, right? So it's ounces and milliliters, or it's or grams, right? Ounces and grams don't go together. They're two totally different types of communication systems when it comes from a scientific perspective. Any legitimate scientist would never put that on their product. And then now, we're asked as consumers to trust them and like, hey, you're getting Sublimed, which, we have been working with it for 30 years. We're telling you that's at least double the cost. You get lost in the details and the confidence that you might or might not have in that organization.
Oh, yeah, we add that one little note to that. We have played with Sublime, just trying to redissolve it in our chemicals. That Sublime takes 3 or 4 times longer to get fully dissolved back into the chemical solvents. We have clients call us back up in the past, hey, your carbon 60 is not going back to solvents. Look up the data. Okay, you bought the Sublime material. It's going to take a couple of weeks for it to go back into toluene. Now you try to put it back in olive oil or MTC oil, it's going to take forever.
Yep. So you've got the additional cost of the sublimed product, and then the additional cost of mixing a sublimed product in an oil. And if you don't go through it for that extra period of time, you're actually delivering a significantly inferior product. Like the math just doesn't work.
Now, what is sonication? The other process that I've heard some people do.
Ooh, sonication. Well,
let me do a quick. Sonication is a way to make a vastly inferior product, but Robert can talk about the details.
Well, I mean, maybe the ladies, I use the ladies, but the people who buy jewelry, which is not me, but buy rings and stuff, you take your rings back to K Jewelry or your jewelry, and they clean it for you. They usually put it in a sonicator, which is ultra high vibrating device. Just some soap and water and stick it in there, and they vibrate it, and it cleans it. Micro cleans the debris off your ring and make it nice and bright, and shiny. So that's what most sonication machines are used for. People are familiar with that. You can buy the cheap one, at the local hardware store. Some cheap piece of equipment made in China. But sonication is a process where it is the ultra high vibration of this liquid will cause cavitation and and a lot of disturbance. And so that's great for cleaning supplies, cleaning your tools, and things like that. There, that's what sonication typically used to clean stuff. Now, people have watched things on YouTube, say, "Hey, I could do that," and so let's take our oil, put it in a beaker, let's stick our carbon 60 in it, and let's put it in a sonicator, and start mixing it. It's a great mixing device. So now they mix it up in there, and voila, it's done in 2 hours. Depends on the volume.
2 hours instead of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but in the process of doing that, you will oxidize the oil, really oxidize the oil, heat the oil up, and give you a couple of examples. We bought samples, so everybody that's out there trying to sell products, we do sonication every once in a while, do a quick test for our purposes. We don't sell sonicated products, but if you ever taste a sonicated oil, needless to say, carbon 60 or not, a sonicated oil will have this kind of metallic electrical taste in the background. The first time I tasted it, I had this flashback to my probably 8-year-old kid sitting in the room with my electric slot cars. I don't know if you remember that. Maybe I'm telling you how old I am. But the old electric slot cars, you had little metal tracks. You put your little car on top of it, and you squeeze the little trigger, and it shot around the track, making sparks and stuff. Or electric train set. That arcing smelled exactly like the oil I tasted. And that's what that backflash I had. Ooh, that tastes like my slot car. And so that sonication causes that metallic electrical smell in the oil, and that's it's the oxidation in the flavor. I mean, I'm not gonna name companies who does that, but that's when we got our first sample, and whoa, man, that's terrible tasting. So if you're taste that flavor, it's not from us. It's probably from somebody else who bought it, and ours is mixed for 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks. All depends on the process and oil. We take it out and we analyze it, make sure it has met the proper solubility level of our ESS60.
Awesome. Well, that explains all the different ways that carbon 60 can be processed to be delivered to humans, but the HPLC machine that proves that you got pure C60 is probably going to be your safest. It's the only one that's guaranteed to be safe. The others might be a little questionable, but our lab after 30 years has certainly tried all of the different ways to manufacture and chosen the one that we believe works the best for all of you who want to consume it and share it with your pets. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
And our website is C60 Evo, like evolution.com.